that I have, or that I have on order to upgrade, is to use fucking Nautilus coils. Nautilus coils are made by the company that I already love and trust because I love my little fucking baby. I'm mad at the doctor. Before I took it on a plane.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Garret Dostal, and I'm the Tequila brand ambassador for Hiatus Tequila. And it's a pleasure to be able to join you today for our Tequila live stream on Tequila, regulation, and economics. It's going to be quite a long live stream, much longer than I originally expected. So please bear with me. It'll be about an hour and a half, but you can jump in or out whenever you want. And it will be hosted live on our YouTube channel after the fact. So if you want to miss anything and come back, you certainly can. Or if you want to stay with us, we'd be glad to have you. So please bear with me. Let me go ahead and do just a tiny bit of calibration, and then we will get started, okay? All right, looks like we are all calibrated. And the mic volume is coming in well. And just so you guys know that the live stream feed is roughly 30 seconds to 45 seconds in delay. So if you ask me questions, comments, or concerns, I will try to address them, but it's going to be rather difficult. So please just shoot them over to Hiatus Tequila's Instagram, and I'll be able to answer them after the fact. All right, my friends, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so why are we here today? We're here to talk about tequila regulation and economics. And the first thing we have to talk about when we're talking about tequila regulation is what is tequila? So I know we've gone over this 100 times in all my live streams, and you guys probably know really well by yourself, but let's go over it a little bit more. So what is tequila? First of all, tequila is an alcoholic beverage from Mexico, and it's made from the blue Weber agave plant. And it's protected by an appellation of origin designation, and that's the most important part for regulation and economics. The appellation of origin sets the rules and the precedent in which it is being regulated. So it's very important that we understand that it's very special and unique. It's very much like champagne or some cheeses and other things that you can get in like Italian produce and stuff like that, where it's specifically designated by the region in which it is grown, as well as the environmental factors that affect its production and methodology. So tequila can only be made from blue Weber agave. It's in the rules and it's in the appellation of origin. It can also be only produced in 5 specific geographic regions: Jalisco, Guanajuato, Michoacan, Nayarit, and Tamaulipas. And this is set by the designation of origin. So appellation of origin ties geographic location to a product. And it's also monitored and regulated. Appellations of origin have to be monitored, and it is monitored by a conformant assessment agency in Mexico called the CRT. This is a nonprofit, this is a separate organization from the actual Mexican government. It's not an entity of the government body, but it is a conformity assessment agency that they've created to help regulate the production methodology of tequila. And to do so, they're following the rules and regulations that have been set by the Mexican government inside of the NOM 006. And NOM stands for Normal Oficial Mexicano, which stands for the concept of like a rule or a law. So if you go to the NOM, it'll have all the different details about what tequila is, what it cannot be, what it means, what it doesn't mean. And NOM 006 is the specific number of the law that regulates tequila. So when talking about tequila, the most important thing to really understand with regulation and economics is that what tequila is for the economics portion, and how tequila is being monitored, and what tequila means. And I use the word means as in like the definition of what tequila is, and that's more of the regulation side. So my friends, let's go ahead and dive right in. Let's dive into tequila, regulation, and economics. All right, so let's go from the regulation perspective. So the regulation is done by a conformant assessment agency that we already talked about, the CRT, also known as the Consejo Regulador del Tequila. These are the people who actually monitor and legislate all of tequila. So they don't make the rules, but they're the ones who enforce it and follow it and report it to the agencies that do. This is their website, and please, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to go look at them. They're the ones who take care of all the different aspects of tequila. So when it comes to what tequila can be, or if any rules are changing, as well as the import, the export, and all those kind of details, it's all through the CRT. It's a great body. We actually partner closely with the CRT, and we fly them in 6 to 8 times a year to partner with one of their programs called the T Awards Certificate Program, where we actually educate bartenders on what tequila is, and you get trained by the Mexican government. And at the end, you get certified. So it's kind of cool. They've got a lot of fun stuff going with them. But this is the Consejo Regulador de Tequila, the actual regulator of tequila. So when talking about them, first thing we got to think about is, so what is it? So about the CRT. They were established in May 1994. So they were established in the late 90s. The Consejo Regulador de Tequila, it's a professional organization that comprises of all factors of the production methodology. and includes the Mexican government. The aim of the CRT is to promote the culture and quality of the beverage and its importance among its identity as a national symbol. It's a lot of words, but what it means is it's saying that every single person who's a part of this tequila process is involved with the CRT. So when you start making tequila, you become a member of the CRT. There's no option or no way around that. And what it's also saying is that the purpose of the CRT is to help promote the culture of tequila as well as the importance of the beverage, saying that the CRT is trying to uphold the appellation of origin. And the purpose of an appellation of origin is to prevent something from becoming generic. So instead of allowing anyone to make tequila under any circumstance and trying to dilute the word tequila, they've set specific rules to help enhance and promote what is good tequila. And that's the whole concept, is that they want to protect these laws and regulations so that any tequila that's made that carries the name tequila has the quality of the product of tequila. So who are they? Well, the CRT is comprised of agave producers, tequila businessmen, packers, marketers, government representation, and anyone who's a part of the cycle to help ensure that the tequila industry succeeds. So here I've got a little infographic at the bottom, and this is kind of like a cycle of all the people involved for the most part. At the very start, you have the agave growers. So anyone who plants agave to be used in the tequila production methodology is part of the CRT. The tequila producers, the people actually making the tequila and fermenting the juice and bottling it, they're a part of the CRT. It says bottlers here because there's actually a secondary possibility. You can bottle tequila off-site, and that's what this is talking about. So if you want to be a bottler of tequila and not make tequila and an external location, you also have to join the CRT. And the last part is the Mexican government. So the Mexican government meaning not only the people who actually regulate tequila, but the people who are above them making the laws and legislation, the entire government as a whole. The appellation of origin, what it really does is it kind of sets tequila as the concept of a trademark. You can't call something tequila without being approved by the Mexican government. The Mexican government really owns the word tequila and everything about it in its right. So let's say you want to have a lip balm that has tequila in it. You have to pay the Mexican government every month, and you have to be regulated to make sure that your tequila and what you're putting in there is proper tequila, and it's done the right way to help ensure the quality standards of what tequila is. Same thing if you want to make an agave spirit and you want to call it tequila. Now you can make an agave spirit and not call it tequila, but to call it tequila, you have to follow the rules and regulations set forth by the CRT. So what is the CRT? Well, we talked about this a little bit, but the CRT's purpose is to secure the compliance of the NOM for tequila, which is 006. So that is to protect the rules and regulations about tequila, first and foremost. So the most important part the CRT does is it makes sure that people are making tequila the correct way, that they're actually making tequila, and that they're not making something else, and that they're not diluting the product, and that they're not doing anything bootleg, and that they're doing everything to quality and standard that is upheld by the CRT. The second thing is that it guarantees the consumer with the product's authenticity. So what that's saying is that by the CRT doing all this regulation, you know that any tequila you drink that's called tequila is real tequila, and it's not something else. And there's a lot of spirits, and if you read in the newspapers and in the past, that there's certain times where things have fluxed, where people have like watered down bottles, they've filled them with other things, and that sometimes people buy these and they get sold. And it's kind of dangerous to an extent. You know, tequila and other spirits are made from a very specific type of alcohol. Other types of alcohol are actually poisonous to our system. One is called methanol, and methanol, when drunk, goes into your liver and creates formaldehyde, which is the same enzyme which it pickles bodies, it embalms cadavers. And so we want to try to avoid any possible tampering with the product and make sure that it's pure and clean and something that is not only palatable, but upholds the standards and the purity of the process. And that's what the CRT does, is it guarantees you that you're getting good juice. The last, another step is that it certifies the compliance of the appellation of origin, both in Mexico and abroad. So the appellation of origin is specifically saying that tequila can only be made in those 5 specific producing regions. And in doing so, you cannot produce tequila anywhere else. There's been multiple times in the history of the world and tequila where people from Mexico have wandered out into the world, into other places, and seen people growing agave and attempting to make spirits from it. One good story is in Japan, a couple members of the Salsa family, way back when, generations ago, went to Japan and saw them growing agave and making spirits from it. They're like, no, this is not your spirit. This is our spirit, the spirit of Mexico. And that's kind of what the CRT does, is it regulates and protects it. And that appellation of origin specifically makes contracts with other countries throughout the entire world saying that you can only call something tequila if it's made in Mexico. There's a lot of people who have these rules and regulations. Bourbon is an American product, and Scotch is made in Scotland. And champagne can only be made in the Champagne region. Not only a good product, but you have a stable product and something that your country can continue to make money with in the exportation markets. So the CRT has many, many, many pieces to its body. So there are 8 departments and 18 services that are offered by the CRT. We're not going to go through all of these. That would be a lot of time and labor to try to talk to you about every single piece and element of this. But there are some important ones. Let's just look at the departments, and we'll not worry about the services. So the CRT is composed of a certification organism, is the word that this is pulled directly from the CRT's website. They use the word organism. I prefer to think branch. They also have a verification unit. They have a physiochemical laboratory, which helps analyze the tequila. They have a quality and control standard department. They have a finished product assurance department, which helps make sure that all the product that actually hits the market is correct. Of course, they have an accounting department because they are a business just like anyone else. They have an internal affairs, same kind of thing, to investigate any kind of issues that may have arisen inside of the tequila producing process. And they also have human resources, because any good business knows how to take care of the people who work for them. Services offered we're going to skip, but this is something to go back and look at if you want to, or you can pause the video, but we're not going to talk heavily about that. We'll touch base on all the important ones coming up. So the CRT, it really has 3 main pillars. And the 3 main pillars out of those 8 different branches are these 3 things: the verification branch, the certification body, and the laboratory. And what do? Well, these 3 branches do 3 very, very important things. 1, the physical confirmation of the process. And this is literally verification of each and every unitary operation, including the raw materials. And when I say each and every unit, I really do mean each and every. There are members of the CRT involved in every single piece of the tequila making process, and that is required by law. Before you can plant, you have to be a part of the CRT. When you're planting, someone's watching. When your plants are growing, they can sit, but when it's time to harvest, someone from the CRT has to watch you harvest. And they have to watch the transportation, and they have to watch every single step of the process. We'll get into that in just a second. The next step is the documentation review. So to become a member of the CRT and to make tequila, you have to be certified by the Mexican government to make sure that you uphold the standards that they have set in place for what tequila should be. And so the document review process, it not only does the accounting documents, because you do have to pay to be a member of the CRT, but it also takes care of commercial information, manufacturing processes, quality standards and systems, and it also handles all the actual applications for certificates for the different pieces of the tequila industry. Sorry, talking a lot, need some water. And the last part is the laboratory. So the CRT actually does have a physiochemical laboratory. And what they do is they do sampling and measurements of tequila. And they look for many different things, anywhere from disease and pestilence that might be growing in strains of agave to making sure that the tequila is the tequila that you say it is. And we'll get into what that means here in just 1 second. But these are the 3 main pillars: the verification, certification, and the laboratory. So let's break them down a little bit more. The verification branch of the CRT. What is verified? Well, when I say every single step, I literally mean every single step. So when it comes to the agave, not only do they monitor the characteristics of the plant, but they also monitor the registration, because to be a member of the CRT, you have to register your plants within the same producing year to be able to make it. They monitor the inventory levels. They see how much tequila you're planting and where it's going. Because once you deem your tequila to be part of the agave industry, you cannot use it anywhere else. It must be used in the agave industry. They also deal with consumption and entries into the market. So there's literally someone on the field physically verifying all these different details. Next, we move into the formulation and fermentation process. There's literally someone from the CRT who pretty much lives at the different distilleries. There are many distilleries in Mexico. Many, many, many. And in each distillery, there's someone from the CRT there physically looking, checking, and making sure that they are complying with the CRT rules. The bigger distilleries have someone who pretty much lives on site or very close nearby who comes in daily. And the smaller distilleries, they can apply for someone from the CRT to come out. But anything that happens at the distillery has to have someone there. So when they're using agave, there's someone there watching the agave. There's literally someone who watches the agave leave the plantation where the agave was grown, and then they reweigh it when it comes back into the facility. And when they weigh it, it has to be the exact same measurement, making sure that no extra agave enter the truck. And then when it lands, they unload the truck, and that agave is watched and monitored and samples are taken to make sure that it is truly blue Weber agave. And there's literally someone for every single step of the process. If you look at this diagram, every single step of the tequila process is very clearly defined and laid out here. And there's a member of the CRT who physically verifies every single step. It's not a trust-based system. There's literally someone there watching it, making sure it happens. The tequila industry is one of the most regulated spirits industries in the entire world. And part of this is because it is physically done. In Mexico, there's a lot of things that are still done by hand, like labeling and bottling in the tequila process. A lot of it's still very manual labor. And in this context, so is the verification of it. There's someone physically doing this at the distilleries, making sure that every single step of the process is there. If you want to taste a barrel of tequila and see how it's aging, you have to call someone from the CRT to come down to cut the seal on the barrel, taste the tequila, and then have them reseal the barrel. And if your barrel's seal has been cut, they dump the barrels because it no longer fits the certification process of the tequila, and it could be tampered with or tainted. Tequila, when it's made, they also take physiochemical tests of the tequila before it ships in bottles, and they record every single one. Like, every single step of the tequila process is fully regulated. And instead of going into each and every one of these, which could take literally the entire time of the live stream, I'm going to skip over it. And feel free to come back and look at this, and it literally lists every single step of the process, from the agave being planted, to the formulation, where you decide what type of tequila you're going to make, to the actual distillation process, to the harvesting, manufacturing, to the bottling, to the quality control of the tequila, all the way through to the labeling process and the actual release of the tequila. Every single step is monitored and regulated by hand. It's a very intensive process. And in Mexico, they literally do this by hand. That's why it's one of the most regulated industries in the world. Every single step, there's someone from the government watching. Big Brother watches every single step of the process. And there's nothing wrong with that. It ensures the quality and control standards, but it's also very, very, very labor intensive. So that's what the verification body does. It's comprised of lots and lots of people, footwork, manual labor, verifying every single step of the process, taking notes, reporting, documenting, sending it back to the CRT, making sure every single step of the process is very, very specifically scrutinized to make sure that it upholds the standards. The next step, or the next pillar of the CRT, is the certification body. So the certification body does a couple different things. It really certifies two different branches of the tequila industry. The first branch is the producer, the people who are actually growing the agave. The second branch is the producer, the people making the tequila. The second branch is the agricultural branch, which is the people growing the agave. And this is talking about multiple different types of certification. So the first certificate that the producer side gets is the actual producer certification. If you want to make tequila, you have to apply for it by the Mexican government, and they have to come out and check your facility, and then it has to go through the whole cycle and get approved before you can make tequila. And we'll go through that here in just a minute. We're going to go through every one of these. And then the other thing that for the producer side that it does is the export. So not only do you have to be certified to make tequila, if you want to sell tequila outside of Mexico or export it from the country, you have to apply for a certificate, and you have to be able to approved to do so. Even if you want to sell tequila outside of one of the 5 tequila producing regions, you have to be approved to do so. You're more than wholeheartedly allowed to, in your own right, sell tequila within your tequila producing region, but if you want to sell it outside of your tequila producing region, you have to apply for a certificate to do so. Agriculture. So they also regulate the agricultural perspective, the people growing the tequila. And so the first thing is the registration. Tequila has to be registered to be able to be used in the agave market. As you can see, every single person who makes tequila is a part of the CRT. It is a closed cycle, and we will talk about that more. There's no entry into the market for free. There's no free entry. It is a single organism that is owned by the Mexican government, that is legislated by the CRT, that is ran by the people who facilitate tequila production. There's no entry into market without payment and without approval and without certification. So not only do you have to register your plants for the tequila harvest, they get tracked by satellite. And we'll get into that in here in a second. Yes, they actually get tracked by satellite. The plants that make tequila get tracked by satellite. They also issue bills of agave transfer. So if you're going to actually harvest the tequila and move it from your fields to a tequila distillery, you have to apply for a permit to do so. And they have to weigh it, and they have to measure it, and then monitor it, and they have to weigh it when it gets there, and they have to weigh it back in. It's a lot of process. They also regulate and deal with the agave movements. The tequila bill of transfer, they mark along the way where the tequila went to make sure that nothing happened to it and nothing, got added to it or taken away, because tequila does have age regulations with it. And the last thing they investigate. So let's go ahead and get into these a little bit more in detail. So Tequila Producers. You want to make tequila. All right, that's not a problem. Let's talk about making tequila. So you want to enter the agave market and become a tequila producer. Wonderful. So you have to apply to the Mexican government. And after you apply, this is what happens. First, you apply to the Mexican government. They issue an inspection report. So someone comes out to the place where you claim you want to be making tequila, and they examine your facility wholeheartedly from top to bottom to make sure that it complies with NOM 006 in regards to the tequila production requirements. If you are approved and you do meet the requirements, then they issue the authorization or approval to produce tequila. Now, at this point, if you look, the CRT moves up to the DGN. The CRT submits their report to the DGN, which is the actual Mexican government. The Mexican government then looks at your request and decides whether they want more tequila producers or not. Maybe there's too many, maybe there's not enough, we'll see. And the DGN, the Mexican government, then decides whether they want to, and then they will issue your authorization or approval to produce tequila, if they so choose to do so. Bounces back down to the CRT. The CRT will issue you a NOM number. A NOM number is the actual number of your distillery. So in tequila, every single factory that makes tequila has a number associated to it. And that's how they monitor tequila. So if your tequila is made at a factory, there's a number. We, as Hiatus Tequila, have NOM 1137, La Cofradia. La Cofradia makes our tequila in NOM 1137. There's a lot of other tequilas made there as well. Once you get your NOM number, if you're going to make tequila, by yourself. This is not partnering with the distillery. This is literally the process of if you want to have a distillery yourself. So the CRT will then bounce it to the IMPI, and they issue the appellation of origin documents to allow you to start making tequila, saying that you were in the proper time, and that's what the IMPI does, is they check to make sure you're in the right geographic location, and that everything's good, and that you fit the qualifications, and then after they do that, they bounce it back to the CRT. And then with the technical expression report and the DGM and the NOM number and the DOT from the IMPI, the CRT will then issue you the approval to start making tequila. It's a very long process. It goes through 3 different steps of the Mexican government before you can be approved to make tequila. But the reason they do this is to protect that appellation of origin, to make sure that you're not going to do anything janky and that you're going to protect what tequila is and its integrity and its right. And it is very intense. It's lots of steps. And so that's why people don't tend to make their own tequila. They partner with producers. There's a lot of factories in Mexico, and all of them tend to make more than one tequila. And in doing so, you can go to a tequila factory and say, hey, I want to make tequila. And that's why you see people partnering with distilleries and not trying to open their own. It's a very intensive process to try to open your own distillery. It's much easier to partner with someone who already has a distillery. Then you only have to get approved to make tequila, as opposed to approved to be a producer to make tequila. After these steps are all done and you're approved, then you are monitored by the verification body. Remember, we talked about the verification body. They monitor every single step of the process. So from planting of the fields, to harvest of the fields, to the very step where the agave lands into the place, from your cooking, to your formulation, to your fermentation, to your distilling, to your aging, if you so choose to your bottling, and then when it leaves your plant as well. Every single step of the process is regulated by the tequila. And there's someone from the CRT sitting there watching it happen. So on that context, let's say you did become a tequila producer and you produce tequila, but guess what? Now you want to export your tequila. Well, guess what? The Mexican government has to approve you to export your tequila too. So from the beginning, you start with the tequila production plant. That's you. So we start with you. You present your application to the CRT that you want to sell your tequila abroad, and you can only get one certificate of export per batch. And so each single batch needs a new certificate of export. So you start by applying, and you submit it to the certification board of the CRT. CRT receives your application, checks the requirements and the documents, and then what it does is it passes it to the verification board. The verification branch then receives the documents from the certification branch, assigns an inspector to go to your plant and check the batch of the tequila to be exported. So you might have the tequila already made, sitting in your warehouse ready to go, but before it can go, someone has to come back to you after you applied to be able to export it and check your product. After they check your product, they take samples and then they seal them in containers and then they ship them to the laboratory that we were talking about earlier. And what does that lab do? They receive the samples and they conduct an analysis on the product. And the analysis, what it does is it makes sure that it is the tequila it claims to be. In the NOM 006, which regulates tequila, there are very specific physiochemical parameters that make each tequila. Such things as Blanco tequila is not allowed to have additives. So when they take a sample of Blanco tequila and they burn it, there's only supposed to be so much ash left in the bottom of the tray. And that ash is the leftover byproduct. Same thing with Reposado or Añejo. And there's certain allowances where you can have X number of leftover ash in each batch. Also, there's certain things like the proofing and the volume, and this is all the stuff that the laboratory and the accreditation is checking. The other thing they're doing is they're taking a sample of your tequila, and they're recording all these physiochemical parameters, and they're putting it in a file. Every single tequila that has ever been produced has a file on it after 1995 that specifically details the different parameters of that tequila. So if there was ever a question if the tequila in the bottle is that tequila, all they have to do is send the tequila to Mexico, to the accreditation board, and that laboratory can then test it to see if it is the same tequila. They can check for if your tequila has been messed with at all, tampered with, if it's a different spirit in the bottle, or they can say if it's another tequila. Because there are issues where people try to bootleg tequila, and it has been an issue before in the past. So the Mexican government makes sure that the tequila in the bottle is the one it says it is, and not just is tequila, but is the one it says it is. Specifically being from the exact batch it was produced. And there's no reason why it shouldn't be the exact tequila that was produced from that specific batch. And the Mexican government can know by testing it and putting it through these physiochemical tests and these spectrographs. Afterwards, it then gets passed back to the verification branch. The verification branch inspector issues an approval document if you did get approved, and if you didn't, good luck. And then indicating the number of pallets can be placed on the container. So they say how much tequila you have and how much you're trying to export, and you can do no more or no less. Then it issues the certificate of export from a different branch, from the certification branch, which goes back to you at your distillery. Once you receive your certificate, you can then export and ship your product. And then afterwards, when it's being shipped, you have to surrender the original document to the exportation agents at the border, that is where it's being sent. So when you think about this, it's once again a multiple step process that is being physically done by hand. So it goes from you to one part of the branch, to the next part of the branch, to the last part of the branch, to back to the previous part, back to the previous part, back to you. So tequila is the most regulated spirit in the world, I am telling you. Reason being is every single thing is not only monitored and checked, but every single person who's involved in the CRT gets involved in every single aspect. So if you want to export tequila, every single part of the CRT is touching your product. And there's no exception to that. You'll be monitored not only by the verification board, but it'll come back to the verification board when it comes to your compliance to be able to export. It is the most regulated big brother industry in the spirits world. So certificate of export. This is what you're getting, a piece of paper. And what it does is it allows you to export tequila with the purpose and the amount that is indicated on the actual export document that you've gotten from the CRT. You keep a copy, and another copy goes to the port of entry in which it's being exported. Mexico has multiple ports of entry. I believe that there's somewhere around 181, if I remember the numbers correctly. I could be wrong. And there's only about 5 or 7 of them that can actually export tequila. Reason being is they actually monitor the export. So those people at those borders can actually make sure that the tequila in the container is what it says it is. They are trained to be able to weigh it and to monitor it and make sure that it is what it says it is on the board of export. Now coming back to the regulation, it's crazy because the certification, not only what you do is to, if you want to, now we're moving into the production side. So that was the producer side. So producer side, you become approved to be a producer, and then the only time you really have to come back to the certification board is when you need to get an export document. Now from the other side, from the agricultural side, the first thing you have to do is you have to register your agave. Meaning, you have to register the plot of land in which you want to grow agave. So you come to the CRT, and you show them your land, and they will find it on a Google Map-esque app, and they will point it out just like this does, and it says, is this your land? And you say yes. And then they track it by satellites, and they do some math to decide what is the square footage or hectares of that area. And then afterwards, they know roughly how many agave should fit in that land. And then that way they know exactly how many tequila are going to be in the agave market at any given time. And so there's really never an agave crisis. You know, you hear the terminology agave crisis. Agave crisis is really an issue when it comes more of people wanting to pay for agave and more of sourcing and less of it being available. There's always agave available. They're tracking the agave by GPS satellites at any given time. This is the most regulated product in the entire world. They know exactly how many agave are planted, and that's why they're literally tracking with the verification board, because if you register your agave to be for the agave market, it better go to the agave market, and it shouldn't go anywhere else. Same thing where if you have off-spill tequila, you have to track that and report that to the CRT, because they want to know exactly where the tequila is going, because tequila should enter the tequila industry once you say it should, and it should go nowhere else. Otherwise, you can lose your accreditation. So, after you start getting your plants tracked by GPS satellite, then the planting will be monitored by the verification board. The verification board will monitor your planting, and then they will also monitor the agave that you're putting in the ground. They will test it, And then the next time they'll get involved with you when you're planting the agave is when it's time for harvest, because they will be there at the harvest to make sure that the right amount of agave is leaving the field and going to the place where it's supposed to be, to which distillery. Now, let's talk a little bit about the satellite technology. So the CRT knows exactly what's happening anytime in the agave market by satellite. Because you've registered your plot of land and they've done some rough math saying that they know X number of tequila grow in X amount of space. And so what do? They know how much agave you have. They know where it's located. They know who owns it because you registered it. They know how old it is because they know how long it's been on the GPS satellites. And they know its physiosanitary conditions because when the regulators came out, they actually took soil samples, they took water samples, and they tested it to make sure that it fits within everything. And that there's no bacteria or anything that could be harmful to the agave, because they're really trying to protect the industry. Then they also know if you have or have not contracted the tequila plants to a specific producer. So what this means is in the tequila industry, plants tend to be sold ahead of time. Not after the fact, ahead of time. So once you plant your agave, they tend to be locked in to sold to someone, because that way there's more money and flow into the market. So as soon as you get your tequila in the ground, you tend to partner with someone and have it already pre-sold. Now, people like us, Hiatus Tequila, we have specific places where we source our agave. We don't use the agave market. Our agave is sourced directly from our distillery and from 3 specific farming families that we've known for forever. Meaning that we can really monitor and make sure we know what's happening with tequila. But other people who need to source agave from other places or don't have specific sourcing requirements from what they're trying to do can order from the agave market. And anyone who has put their tequila into the agave market can raise their hand and say, hey, I've got a tequila to sell. Does anyone want to buy it? And you can come up and buy it from them, and you can get a mix of tequila. You can get Highland tequila and Lowland tequila and a whole blend in a batch. There's some issues with that. You don't really know what you're getting all the time, and you don't really know how they treated that agave during its life cycle and its growing cycle, unless you're really monitoring it. And so for us at Hiatus, we really like to know what happens to our agave, so we make sure that it's all in our hands. There's nothing wrong with it being out externally, but that tends to be for mass-produced or people who are having a hard time sourcing because they don't have their own plantations. And there's a lot of places that do that, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just a different perspective. And so they know everything, and by satellite. And there's no other spirit in the world that monitors their plants by satellite. Now, I'm not saying there aren't distilleries that might do that, but there's no entire governing body doing that. This is the most regulated spirit in the entire world, I'm telling you. So, after you planted your tequila, it's been monitored by the verification board. The verification board has been watching it, making sure it's living and it's still the same agave and everything's great. You go to harvest it. Well, before you harvest it, you have to apply for a bill of agave transfer. And this is saying that your agave is going to be moving from one location to another. And the reason you have to apply for this bill is because they've been tracking you by satellite. And so if all of a sudden they log into their satellites and they see that your agave is missing, we have an issue. Because your agave can no longer be a part of the agave market. And it's a red flag and you can get fined for it. So you have to apply for a bill of agave transfer. So prior to harvest, you apply for a bill of agave transfer. And when you get approved, it's a really simple process. This isn't like the others. That's why there's no cycle diagram. You can literally go online and there's an application. You can put it in less than 24 hours. You tend to get your bill of agave transfer. But what it will do is you bring this to the verification body who's there while you're harvesting. And after you harvest, they weigh your truck on a big scale. They put down on this piece of paper exactly how much agave was harvested, and the person who weighed it has to sign it, and it has to say exactly what NAMA was and who the inspector was who certified it. And then you take this bill of agave transfer and you keep it in your truck. And as you're driving your tequila to its new destination, you keep it with you. And when you get to your new location, they then will not take the tequila into the distillery until you give them your bill of agave transfer. Because they can get fined if all of a sudden there's something wrong. Once they get the bill of agave transfer, they bring it in, they reweigh your truck. And the agave on the truck has to be the exact same weight as the agave that was sent to the distillery. And if there's any issues, they can dump the entire truck and they can get rid of the entire agave. Or you can't use that agave. So you have to make sure that no one touches your agave. The reason they're doing this is they're trying to protect the agave industry in the CRT and the appellation of origin. They're trying to make sure that the agave that's used is only agave from the specific soils allowed to be used. They're also trying to make sure that anyone who's growing agave is actually participating in the CRT and following the correct standards and paying monthly so that the agave industry can be monitored and make sure that your product is actually upholding the standards. They don't want just rogue agave entering the market. That's what I mean by a closed system. There's no availability to enter this market until you've applied to do so and been approved. It's not a free source market. It is literally a locked-in market. And that's what the bill of agave transfer does. Now, after your agave is delivered, it once again is monitored by the regulation board, and you're completely out of the clear on that. So, the last thing that the certification board does is investigation and recommendations. So what they can do is, due to all this extraneous amount of data that they've collected, well, not extraneous, just the over-incumbent amount of data they've collected, they can offer suggestions to people because they know every single thing about you and the agave market and where the tequila industry sits. So how much agave? They know how much you have. But they can also provide recommendations on the market and when planting cycles should be, and when other people around you have planted, so that you can be more competitive in the market. Because if all the agave was planted at the same time, it's all going to get bottled at the same time. And then there's going to be fluxes in the market, flows, ups and downs, and ebbs and flows. The one thing the CRT doesn't do is force you to plant. The CRT doesn't tell you when you plant or how you plant or why you plant, but what they can do is offer suggestions to make it more competitive for you and more appealing. The CRT, once again, is not a government body. It's not an enforcement agency in that context. They monitor and report to their superiors, who then can take action. So, where is it located? They know exactly where all of the agave is, so they can track demand for agave from different regions. So, there's 5 producing regions. So there might be a lot of agave in one region, like Nayarit, but then you want to move that tequila or that agave to a place that's needing more agave for their market, such as Jalisco. And that's what they can better do, is allow people to better understand where the tequila is and who they need to make partnerships with to make it flow. They also know who owns it and who, if it's been allocated or not. So this is once again tying back to that. So they can help smaller farmers contract to people who are trying to make tequila. They also know how old it is. And so they know roughly about how many bottles of tequila can be produced at any time. Tequila has an average life cycle. It takes about 7 to 7.5 years to be able to grow. Companies like ours, like Hiatus, tend to harvest at the peak of its fertility. So we really harvest more like 7.5, 8 years. But for the most part, they can do the rough math and know when the agave fields were planted, because you registered with them. And they know exactly how many bottles can be produced at any given time. So they know how many plants are roughly at 7 years. So they know roughly how many bottles of tequila can be produced that year. And then when you actually apply for the tequila production, the people on the verification board can verify how much tequila you made. And so they can actually start tracking how much tequila is in the market and how much can be sold or exported at home or abroad. They also know the physiosanitary conditions. And this is to help protect and maintain the healthy biodiversity and microbiomes of the agave plants. And that ties back to when you register your actual plot of land and they monitor the plots. It's to help protect the agave. Agave, unlike other industries, is very, very, very inbred. Agave is very susceptible. At any given time, it could fall to like phylloxera, like wine did. If there was any kind of disease that came in, very much like the Irish potato famine, the entire agave industry could be wiped out. Tequila tends not to be regrown by new genetic material. It tends to be cloned. And so tequila, they use what's called rhizomes, and that's the little baby agaves that grow on the side of the plant. And they pull those out and they replant them, and they'll grow into full agaves. And so each agave tends to be a clone of the previous generation. So as opposed to the biodiversity that you would get from seeds and pollination, you're getting these rhizomes, and these clones tend to create a very, very, very tight genetic pool. And if anything happened to the agave industry, the whole thing could be wiped out. Now, you might ask, this sounds crazy, why are they doing this? Well, to be honest with you, agave has one life. So it either is going to produce tequila, or it's going to produce offspring through sexual reproduction. So it can either create seeds and pollen and pollinate, or it can be made into tequila. And in the tequila industry, the blue rubber agave is so important that it is not allowed to bloom. And bats are what actually do the pollination. These bats would come out and they would touch the top of the plant when it actually blooms, and it would collect the pollen and move it around. There are certain tequila distilleries that are trying to help increase the biodiversity of the agave plants. But for the most part, it's a very inbred industry. So it's very tight, and there's not a lot of room to spare there. Tequila can be very, very dangerous in that context, where one thing like the Irish potato famine could wipe it all out. So if agave go missing, they can investigate theft. They can also help prevent theft by knowing how many agave are in the fields, and they can look in the satellites and see if agave is missing. They can prevent bootlegging by knowing that agave has gone missing or not, and they can help create legislation or create action against people who have done so. And the last thing they do is protect illegal additions or subtractions from the agave market. It's a closed cycle. They know exactly how many plants are entering the market, where they're going, where they're going to be produced, how much tequila is going to be made. If there are numbers missing anywhere in the tequila production or in the tequila harvesting, they can come and take action against it. You have signed your tequila to be a part of the agave market. It will be a part of the agave market, and there's no exception to that, unless something severely happens, like there's a spill or something happens and the agave plants die. But for the most part, they know exactly what's going to happen. And the reason it's so regulated is so that they can protect the economic impact from the agave market in Mexico, because it's so important to Mexico. All right, and the last part of the little regulation section here is the certified laboratories. So the laboratories are the very last part of the pillars of the CRT. And what they do is they do exactly these things. They test the tequila. On the right here is actually a graph taken directly from NOM 006, and that shows the physiochemical parameters of tequila. And so when you submit your tequila to be exported or when you submit it to be sold, they take a sample of it. And like I said, they put it in a file and they track it. In case anything happens, they can report back to it and see what's happened to the tequila. But at the same time, what it does is make sure that the tequila stands and upholds the standards of tequila. They also do a lot of other things. They do a lot of research. They help protect the tequila plants. They look into the water, the microbiology, the soil. They try to prevent disease, and they also look for what tequila makes better tequila. Maybe certain agave plants are producing more sugar, and more sugar is better for fermentation. So maybe they try to increase the rhizomes or the spread of the certain clones and genetic processes as opposed to other agave plants. And that's really what the laboratories do. They test, and they help facilitate and support the other branches of the agave industry and the CRT. So here's what I have a little picture of, is what I call the closed agave market. So there's only a couple points of entry into the agave market. And once again, the agave market is the growers, the producers, the bottlers, and the government. To enter, you have to register your agave within the same planting year. So the first rule of entry, if you're a grower, would be to register your agave with the market. Once it's registered, you can enter the agave industry, and then you can start selling your tequila to the people making tequila, and it works really well. But there's no really other point of entry for an agave grower unless you register in the same year. If your plants are already in the ground, you cannot register. You have to pull up all your plants and then replant to be able to register the next year. And this is in the same calendar year. If you plant in November, you only have until December to register. If you register in January, your plants are gone. Tequila producers. It's the other point of entry. You can apply to be a tequila producer, meaning you can apply to make tequila. Now, for the most part, the producers already exist. They've been making tequila for a very long time, and we partner with them, and that's what a lot of distillers do like us. We work with La Cofradia as opposed to making our own tequila in our own building. We partner with people who know how to make it better than we could. And apply to be a tequila producer. And that's kind of like the point of entry. You can apply, and that's one point of entry. Next point of entry is a bottler. But to be a bottler, you must be connected to a distillery that's already producing tequila, and you also have to already be producing a spirit. And bottlers really don't exist in Mexico. For the most part, bottlers are abroad. And reason being is it's much easier to transport liquor than it is glass. So certain places like Jose Cuervo has a lot of places in America where they can bottle tequila. And they come over in trucks, and then it gets go to the distillery, and then they bottle it. And the CRT still regulates this process. They would come out and check the distillery to make sure it fits all the requirements of the CRT, and then nothing's being tampered with. But bottlers can happen abroad, but it can only happen for non-100% de agave tequila. This is the tequila that's made with 51% agave and 49% other sugars. And then the last part would be the Mexican government. You can apply for a seat on one of the many boards that are a part of the CRT, or maybe you're part of the Mexican government. And then that's the other point of entry to the CRT market. But it's a closed market. You can't just raise your hand and be like, I want to join the CRT, or I want to join the agave market. You have to apply, and it takes time. So how do they do this? How does the CRT do this? Well, the CRT, as you can see the little symbol at the top, has multiple locations all over the world. In Mexico, they obviously have the CRT, and they have a CRT branch in every single one of the producing states in Mexico. The other place they have one is here in Washington, D.C. in the United States. The United States has a board of the CRT, and what it does is it protects the tequila industry in America. And if you're wondering why, because we are one of the biggest consumers of tequila from Mexico. The other couple places they have it, one is in Spain, another Spanish-speaking country, very close to Mexico, very close to their heart, another big exporter. Sweden, another big country which helps regulate Europe, and then China. And the reason China, you might think that's a little weird, is China was one of the original places that we were having issue in Mexico in the CRT with rules and regulations. China wasn't a part of the free trade agreements or the World Trade Organization a while back, and they were making their own tequila, their own bootleg version of tequila, which was not tequila, and it didn't fit within the appellation of origin. But once they joined the World Trade Organization, they had to apply and submit to the rest of the rules and regulations of the World Trade Organization. And one of them is acknowledging that Mexico has its own product and you cannot make it. And so because this was one of the largest markets with bootleg issues in products, the CRT opened a branch there to help protect the industry. So yeah, there are 5 different markets where the CRT does exist. So that's regulation. So regulation, they're a part of every single process. This is literally the most regulated spirit in the entire world. Every single step of the process is regulated. From production to growth to harvest to cycle, every single piece is regulated. It's intense. There's no other spirit that has someone there watching over every single step of the way, except the people making it. making the product itself. So next thing we're going to talk about is economics. Tequila is a profitable venture, and Mexico wants to protect that because it is a very large income revenue stream for Mexico. And that's part of the reason why the CRT exists and all these rules and regulations do, and why they have an appellation of origin on it and other people can't make it, to help provide and protect the economic impact of tequila on Mexico, the culture, the heritage, the people, because it is their beverage. So let's get into it, friends. The fun part. If you're still with me, I appreciate it. There's a lot of talking here, I know, but it's fun for me. I hope it's fun for you. But tequila regulation and economics. So here comes the economics portion. So, economics. When I was preparing for this presentation, I talked to a lot of people about economics, and there was a lot of discrepancy about what economics is, and that's perfectly fine. I was blessed to be able to take multiple economics courses in my life, and some people don't understand economics. So here's a bunch of different types of economics. We're not going to talk about them all. The ones we are going to talk about are the ones in green. Reason being is that there are very specific things that impact the tequila industry more than others, and we've already had a very long presentation, and I don't want to drag it on too much longer. We could spend days talking about economics of tequila, but we're really going to touch on some specific topics, and the ones in green here. But let me just go ahead and pull those up for you. So we're going to talk about competition and market structures. We're going to talk about consumer demand and elasticity of the market. We're going to talk about entrepreneurs, producers, roles of the government, and supply. These are the big branches of the economics I really want to touch on today in the last little bit of our presentation, because they're the biggest part of the tequila regulation and economics. So let's talk about competition and market structures. I give a little definition here, just in case anyone wants to have a better definition or we're confused about what we're going to talk about. This is the definition that I'm going off of for competition. So competition is the act of endeavoring to gain what another endeavors to gain at the same time. Competition, competing over the same thing. When it comes to the tequila industry and competition, the word tequila is owned by the Mexican government. So it is a very closed system. So there's no competition externally when it comes to tequila. No one else can make tequila. So all the competition comes from inside. It's an internal competition. Brands competing against brands for popularity and for, clout to be able to sell more tequila than other people. It's kind of a nice thing to have a closed competition market, but at the same time, it does create its own issues because it's harder to be able to sell two of the same products than it is to compete with someone else. And it creates less diversity in the context of different countries, saying like French's wine is better than America's wine, like the big grape wine debate, way back in the 1970s. That will never exist because Mexico owns the word tequila. So competition is all internal. And it's more about preference and brand to brand than it is about anything else. The market structure. So tequila, because it's all owned by the Mexican government, really is a monopoly. There's only really one person who can offer the goods and services, and that is the government of Mexico and the CRT, which regulates all of it. So the competition and market structure of tequila is very tight-knit. It's a competitive internal market that is a monopoly based on the government of Mexico. And so in that context, the only true competition is internally for tequila. But there is also other competition within that market, and that comes from external competition. But it comes from external competition in a very weird way. It comes from external competition in diversity. The tequila market does have competition with other desert spirits, including mezcal, sotol, bacanora, raicilla. And in America, you can easily see people swapping tequila for mezcal all the time. So there's an external competition over different products, which is a very unique thing, as opposed to an competition over the same product. When you see like the vodka industry, where like Goose competes with Kettle, and that's about it. But these are different brands from different places with different ingredients and different things, where in tequila, it's all tequila. But now we're competing with external products as well. There's not really like a vodka substitute that vodka is competing with. Vodka competes with vodka. The other thing that tequila competes with is agave distillates. Tequila is made a certain way with the CRT involved. If you so not choose to be a part of the CRT, you can still make a very agave distillate beverage that follows all the rules and regulations of tequila. It just will not be tequila. It'll be an agave distillate. And over the last 4 years, there's been a large growth in agave distillates. Reason being is they don't have to pay the Mexican government every year to regulate tequila. This also does create some discrepancies because now you're not getting the same quality or standard. And when you say that I'm drinking an agave distillate, it still doesn't have a ring for me yet. It's not really a product yet. It's still a category and it's still in development. But there are more and more entering the market. And I used to be a bar manager not that long ago, and even at the bars, people would come in and sell me product as a tequila. And then at the very end, they'd tell me it's an agave distillate. And looking into it, you'd find out that they're doing different things, or they're adding things, additives, and stuff that aren't part of the tequila process, which make less of a pure product. I'm not saying that they all do. Some great tequilas in Mexico so choose not to be a tequila because they no longer want to pay the Mexican government every month. And there's nothing wrong with that. They built their brand, they built their reputation, and now they can succeed. But you won't see those brands across the border because people won't know what they are. And still, people don't really understand the concept of agave distillate. The other thing tequila competes with is other spirits. You know, when you look at the spirits industry, it's a very large industry, and tequila does compete with other things like vodka and gin, and especially in the context of like lower calorie. Although tequila might be the lowest calorie beverage on the market, it still competes side by side with things like vodka. And all the time you see people ordering like a vodka soda or a tequila soda, and it's a personal preference. So other spirits do, and personal preference, do influence the competitive nature of tequila. Although tequila has no natural competitors when it comes, because only tequila can be made in tequila from Mexico, there are other factors that do create competition. It's just a different style of competition. And the last thing I really want to talk about here on the market structure is that tequila should be the most expensive spirit in the world. Tequila takes 7 years to grow. It is the only plant and spirit in the world that cannot be made every single year. It takes 7 years to grow. So we think of Scotch, which is produced in 1 year and then aged for X number of years, you're really paying for the aging of that product. Where in tequila, it takes 7 years for the product to grow. That's 7 years of it sitting in the ground before it can even be aged. And then after the fact that it's aged, you could be adding another 3 years onto that. So you might be bottling a 9-year tequila, when in reality, you're paying the same price as you would if you were buying it as if it only took 1 year to make. And the reason being is because of Mexico's labor. Mexico's labor keeps it very low. Mexico, as a country, has a very low labor cost, and so we're able to keep the product very low. Tequila shouldn't really be able to sit inside of the well of bars and restaurants, and it shouldn't be able to be used for the cheaper cocktails. It should be a much, much more expensive product, especially when you think of the amount of regulation that goes into it. Every single thing is regulated by these people who are all getting a paycheck, and the government is watching every single step of it. There are so many people involved to make one bottle of tequila. It should be the most expensive spirit in the world, but it's not, because we're able to keep the cost down by making it in a country that has a lower labor rate. And if it was made in any other country, it would literally be one of the most expensive spirits you could drink. And I'm glad it's not, because to be honest with you, I love drinking tequila. And eventually, maybe one day we'll be paying the price of tequila that it should, quote unquote, be marketed as, and competitive rates to Scotch. But in the meantime, let's enjoy it while we can. So the next thing we want to talk about is consumer demand and elasticity of demand. So consumers are people who are consuming the beverage for themselves and not for other people. So if you're a retailer, that'd be you buying it and you want to resell it. A consumer's direct consumption. You're actually going to drink it. And we're going to get into this in just 1 second. I've got a lot of charts and graphs. I just want to kind of set a precedence of what the terminology we're going to use. Demand is talking about the wanted product, supply and demand. It's how much are people asking for it and how much is available. And the elasticity of demand kind of ties in the same kind of concept. It talks about price point and availability and how much we're willing to pay for a product at a certain price. And there's an elasticity of that demand. As the price goes up, we might want it less because it's more expensive. Or we still want it enough to keep it going. And that's the elasticity of demand. It kind of talks about like the market as a whole and how flexible it is between price and the quantity available for consumers or quantity demanded from consumers to be able to be put into an industry or market. So consumer demand and elasticity. So let's start looking at this a little bit. So this is a chart pulled directly from the CRT. Let's talk about production total. So tequila production totals going from 1995, reason being is in 1994 the CRT was created, so the very next year they started tracking everything. And so from that time till now, you can see tequila keeps going up. Production totals keep going up. So obviously demand is rather high because production is not only going up, but it is being consumed. It's not sitting on shelves, it is actually being sold. And you'll see that in the next chart. There's two different types of tequila. 100% agave, meaning it's made only out of agave, and tequila, which means it only has to be 51% agave. And if you look at this chart, for the most part, regular tequila was in the lead until about 2008. And that's when fluctuations really started happening. And then in recent years, sitting about 2015, is when the 100% agave finally took the market. We at Hiatus Tequila are 100% de agave. We're very proud of that. Because actually prior to the 1950s through 70s, prior to the 1950s through 70s, tequila was all 100% de agave. And then as it started becoming more popular in an exporting product, they found out that they can make it cheaper and faster by using sugar, and that's when they really started making the other type of tequila. And then it wasn't much later when the regulations started being produced to really separate these two distinct categories of tequila. And now, luckily, today we do have the separation. Reason being is 100% of agave tequila takes not only more time to make, it's a purer product, has less things inside of it that affect your system. Your body really has to produce more enzymes to filter out regular tequila. You have to produce an enzyme for the sugar, and then you have to produce an enzyme for the agave. So your body really has to fight more to clean it out of your system. And if you've ever had a bad experience, which I hear all the time in tequila, it tends to be because you were drinking tequila and not 100% agave tequila. Because 100% agave tequila is much easier on your body. Your body can actually process it much easier. So demand. Now we're going to talk about export a little bit. So we're talking about demand. So that was production. Now this is export. So tequila can be exported either in bulk or in bottle, and that's what this means, in bulk or in bottle, and Vaso is in bottle. And you can kind of see the line here. For a while there, tequila was exported mostly in bulk, meaning it was being bottled abroad. So when it was being exported in bulk, it would come to America, get rebottled, and then resold. And by law, you're not allowed to sell in bulk tequila that is 100% agave. It's only the other tequila. And so this kind of fits very closely to that other graph we were looking at, where if you look at the 100% agave line, you see it start low and go up, and same thing on the other side. So when you look at the previous graph we were just talking about right here, you see 100% agave start low and go up. And then when you look over here, the bulk side kind of stayed high and has kind of stayed consistent. So for the most part, we're still producing the same, and we're still exporting at least the same, if not more. So what does that mean to us? Well, this is totally tequila exported. So total tequila exported, as you can see, once again has gone up. And as you can see, the 100% to the non-100%, you can see that at the same time, it still has gone up. So all these things mean great things. You know, tequila is being exported more, it's being made more, it's being produced more. But this is the graph that really makes sense for demand. The total consumption of tequila. Total consumption of tequila is ravenous. So when you look at the consumption of tequila, you can really see 100% agave tequilas have skyrocketed since 2008, and the consumption keeps going up. So as long as the consumption is going up, that shows demand. And as long as the demand is going up, the production is going to go up. And as you can see by the previous graphs, there have been no dips. It keeps moving forward. Well, I mean, there have been some slight subtle dips, but it hasn't been dramatic in that context. For the most part, production has gone up every single year since then. And it just varies on the type that's being produced primarily. But if you can see here, the total amount being consumed is a lot. The demand keeps going up. And if you look at these last couple of years we've had, going from 2012 moving forward, it keeps going up and up and up. So demand is on high. The want the tequila. Consumers are ready to have it. And the elasticity of market kind of ties to this. If you look at the elasticity of market, it's how much is available and how much we're willing to pay. Well, 100% agave tequila costs more. We're willing to pay more for it, and we want more of it. So the market obviously has some elasticity and is willing to play and willing to bend to the whims of the consumer. And here we're talking about export by destination, because that also plays a very large fact in who is the consumer. So if you look here, especially at the very, very last here, you can see that U.S. has the most export of anyone. We drink over 80% of all the tequila consumed that actually exports from Mexico. The United States drinks 80% of all the tequila that actually exports from Mexico. It's a huge number. So when it talks about consumer and demand, that means America's demanding more and consuming more. So when you look at the previous graphs, it really skews the numbers because it really means that we are the leading factor in all tequila consumption. So whatever the United States is wanting is what's going to affect the market. And on that note, the U.S. spirits market. You know, the distilled spirits market is a major part of the U.S. economy, and it generates over $190 billion a year. And for the past 15 years, both volumes and the revenue from spirits being sold has increased. And people are actually drinking more spirits than they are beer or wine than in the past. And that also number continues to increase. And the distance continues to get less and less between the lighter beverages of alcohol consumption and the heavier, such as the spirits with the higher ABVs. And it continues to go up where more and more heavier ABV spirits are being sold year by year. And that ties to the U.S. tequila volumes. You know, when you look at U.S. tequila, it continues to go up. The demand is there, so the consumption is there, and so it continues to push the market. Here you can see the tequila, and you can also see tequila and mezcal volume trends and predictions on the bottom right, both trending up. So the demand is there for the market, so it will continue to be there. So Mexico's very set. Now here's the thing that really talks about elasticity of the market. Super premium tequila category has been increasing year over year. In 2019, there was a 15% volume in growth over the premium tequilas. meaning tequilas that are more expensive, meaning that we're willing to pay more for a better product, which means that as a consumer, we are opening the elasticity of the market because we are demanding better products and we're also willing to pay more for it. And so we are pushing the growth of the premium tequila market. So the high-end tequilas, we are pushing the growth. So that means the price point is going up. And reason being is because the United States market is consuming so much and demanding so much that we are pushing the market into a very different direction than it was previously. When you look at the tequila exports previously, a lot of them were the regular tequila. Regular tequila is very affordable. 100% agave sits a little bit more to very premium. And here we're talking about very premium tequila that is consistently getting more and more and more popular and more and more and more expensive. So when you talk about that concept of tequila should be the most expensive spirit in the world, a lot of them are starting to get close to the point where they should actually be charged. There are tequilas that are being sold at Scotch pricing and if not higher now. And it's going to be a continuous trend. If you can see here, tequila prices are going to continue to raise. Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to continue to demand the same on products that are raising their prices. It just means that there's a higher premium and the market's going to have to flex in one way or another. It doesn't mean we're willing to pay more for the same thing we're already drinking. But obviously here, with super premium growth in the industry, it means we're willing to try new things that cost more. And on that note, just tying back to the USA and how we influence the tequila market, we're going to talk about tequila and search history online. This is from Google Analytics. So tequila, if you look at 2008 is the first big boom in tequila when it exported 100% to agave over regular tequila. And that number ties all the way back to the very first chart we looked at. It's the exact same peak and spike. And for the most part, interest in tequila when it comes to like search history and the internet zeitgeist and tequila being talked about online hasn't gone up. You know, our interest, it hasn't really shown to peak much, but obviously we're very interested. It's because we've become more familiar with the product. We actually know what it is now. Now we're more educated on tequila than anything else. And for the most part, we don't need to search it. We know what it is. We're just more willing and open-minded to try new things. Now that doesn't mean we know everything, because there's still a lot of brands that there's a lot of like hidden things behind it. You know, a brand like us, Hiatus Tequila, we're very clean. We're very pure. We have no additives whatsoever. We try our best production methodologies. We age our tequila or agave longer prior to production. That way you get a better product to ferment from the ground up. But there's a lot of tequila companies that don't have that mentality or that like machismo or motto behind them. And so it's the kind of thing where we think we know a lot, but we don't know the details. And the devil's in the details, especially with the tequila industry, because you have a very clean, pure product like ours, which gives you no hangover and you have a great time with it. Or you could have a other tequila and you can have a horrible experience. And then you get what I call the tequila flashback, where there's so many people I talk to in the industry who are like, oh, I had tequila that one time and I can never drink it again. And it's like, yo, you didn't have good tequila. And if only you can open people's mind to the cleaner, pure products, it would be better. And I wish I could see more people interested in looking into tequila. But as you can see, we've had a continued steady increase, and it did go up, but it hasn't been nearly as big as it was in 2008. So that was on demand and the market and consumer and the elasticity. So I'm just circling back here to remind you that it's exactly what it was. We're talking about the consumer and the demand, which keeps going up, and our elasticity pushing the market towards super premium. And so as you can see, the US consumes the most. So we are the threshold for what is going to be produced. And so we are the ones who are creating that demand and elasticity in the market. So we're going to continue to see premium top shelf tequilas being produced and entering the market. And in doing so, it creates entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are individuals who are looking to expand their portfolio and create competition, and they do a great job to do so. Entrepreneurs also create the growth of what I call the Disneyland Brands that have a recognizable name, trying to cash in on what they think is the tequila cash cow, seeing the large economic growth and the moving trends of tequila, trying to get their piece of the dime before the tequila market drops back down. And there's a lot of brands that have done it. A lot of great brands and a lot of new brands. You know, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson just created a tequila. You know, George Clooney just created a tequila. And, you know, even Justin Timberlake was a part of a tequila at one point in time. And now Nick Jonas has a tequila. There's so many people and entrepreneurs who are trying to enter the market and gather their piece of the puzzle before the market changes. And there's plenty of room in the tequila industry for new competition. But keep in mind, all the competition is internal. So the more brands that enter the market, the harder it gets to compete. And so when you go to a bar, you don't see a very big diversity of product. And now there's even more products in the market. And so it's even harder to like flex that diversity and get good, clean, premium products like ours into the market, unless, you know, someone recommends it or brings it into their bar. Because then you have these Disneyland brands as well, where people want to try the new big thing. And it doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be the best or the greatest. It's just, it has a big name behind it, so it has a lot of hype and prestige in a contextual premise, not necessarily a true premise. And so people like fall into that note instead of trying like the clean, authentic tequila, which is maybe a smaller brand that people don't know. They kind of move more towards these like Disneyland brands. And some of them are really good, but some of them are really bad too. But entrepreneurs are always going to be moving into the tequila market. And as you can see, as the demand for super premium tequila increases, so does the demand for entrepreneurs trying to enter the market. Producers. Producers are a huge part of the economic cycle of tequila. And it continues to increase. Producers are people who produce tequila. And we've talked about producers in the context of the CRT and how it's being regulated. But now let's look at some numbers. In 2018, there were roughly 155 authorized producers. They had roughly 1,438 brands and 331 brands that were bottling abroad outside of Mexico. Well, now there's about 259 authorized producers. So there's almost 100 new authorized producers in only 2 years' time. It's a clear showing that the economic growth of the tequila industry is happening. And there's also roughly only 20 more brands that have been certified. So that means there's more people entering the market making tequila, but it doesn't necessarily mean there's more brands entering the market, which means that there could be more people making tequila in different noms and that kind of thing as well. Or it could be people who have applied to become producers who haven't quite made their tequila yet. And so we might even see more growth in the industry coming very, very soon with this very drastic growth in authorized producers. And there's a decrease in the amount of bottles abroad. Reason being is that you see the 100% agave increasing. Regular tequila is staying the same, if not less. So some of the people who are in the regular tequila game are now switching over to the 100% agave game, creating even more competition in the premium market because they see that growth in the premium field. So they're trying to capitalize on that. And you cannot bottle tequila abroad if it's a premium tequila made 100% agave. So that's why you'll see a decrease in the brands being bottled abroad. And a huge part of the economic cycle is the role of the government. So here is a list of different governments and different marks that they give for certification. So a huge part of the economic cycle of tequila is the CRT and the Mexican government going to different countries and fighting to protect what is their product. And what they've done is, out of all 50 of these countries, they've applied for whatever mark is available to them to protect their products. Now, not all countries have that concept of, copyright or appellation of origin, but the ones that do, they have applied for it, and they've protected their products. Mexican government protecting their products is one of the smartest things they can do, and it's one of the biggest roles of the CRT, is making sure that the product stays not only authentic, but can stay flourishing in its own economic cycle, because it brings a lot of revenue to the Mexican government. And so what they do is the role of the government, the largest thing that they play, besides the regulating and the producing and all that kind of stuff that they monitor, the largest role they play is really international commerce and communication. And that's also why, as you can see, the CRT is not just in Mexico. It's in multiple different locations because they're competing on a global scale. Although tequila might not be as popular in the European countries or, in the Asiatic plains, it doesn't mean it's not going to grow. And it means that they need to be prepared and set up for that. And they also have to protect their product there as well. Because as we've seen in China, although it may not have been a huge product, they were already trying to make a tequila-esque product from it. And China drinks a lot of spirits, If it's the kind of thing that if they didn't protect it, it could be the next Baijiu, it could be the next world seller. And they want to make sure that they're the world seller from their product, from their fields, from their regulation, so that the economic, income flows into their direction. And that's really what they compete for. And the last thing we're really going to talk about here when it comes to economics is we're going to talk about supply. The tequila market, obviously, when it comes to demand, it ties to supply. And as long as there's demand, there will be supply. And as you can see, the Tequila Regulation Council has set themselves up to succeed. When it comes to supply, they track the tequila by satellite. There are GPS satellites tracking every single piece of agave being planted, and they know roughly how many tequila are in the field at any given time. So they know how many bottles can be bottled at any given time due to the age statements of the plants that have been put in the ground at certain times. The supply is never going to be an issue. And we touched a little bit on this earlier. I'm going to talk about it a little bit more. The concept of an agave crisis. It gets a little political here, but some of the bigger brands, when it comes to getting tequila, they want to get it at the cheapest price. Reason being is because they want to be able to create the tequila and create sustainability and really pump through and create more volume and make more revenue off of it. But that creates a little bit of a flux and push on the actual, agave farmer when it comes to what price they're trying to sell it at. And they try to haggle and negotiate. But there's certain times where they don't want to pay that price. And so they won't buy their tequila. And that's when we really get an agave crisis, quote unquote, is when people aren't willing to pay fair rates for the agave. And so then they stop buying agave until the price comes back down. And it's happened multiple times, and we've had little peaks here and there, but there's never really been an agave crisis. There's always agave in the market available to people. It depends on at what price point it's at and who's willing to buy it. Tequila will always be made. There's plenty of supply. And as you can see, there's even more producers being created, and there's even more agave farmers that are being brought into the industry every single year as long as they register their plants within the same growing year. So it's not decreasing by any means. And if you look at the numbers that we were looking at, it's continuously increasing, and our consumption is as well. And as the United States being the largest consumer, we're consuming even more. If the other nations lived up to our consumption rates, then tequila would boom out of this world. But until that happens and people get on board of the good tequila, because every time I talk to one of my friends from Europe or anywhere else, they don't drink tequila because tequila is that thing that hurts them. And they've never had really good tequila, though, to be honest with you. When you think of the brands or you listen to the names that they're talking about, it's not the premium, pure, clean products that have no additives and that don't burn, that really taste the agave. They're the products that really sting and singe, that are cheap, that are easy to get. And the reason being is it's easier to ship and export those. You know, when you're having to pay a high import tax or you're having to pay any kind of duty on goods being shipped, you want to try to ship a cheaper product so the duty's not as high and then you sell it for a higher price. So it might be less quality, but you're paying less money for it overall as opposed to trying to import a premium product. So my friends, that was my little spiel on tequila regulation and economics. The tequila industry is huge, but also there's some large factors to play with it. Regulation is a huge piece of the tequila industry. And it is the most regulated industry in the entire world, with people being active in every single step of the process, physically evaluating and making sure it happens, not just through a computer, but actually there on site. Lots of bodies are in the agave industry and the agave process, making sure that it's happening correctly. Also with the economics of tequila, as you can see, the tequila economics, we are on a rise and we continue to be so. And we're even pushing here in the United States the growth of the tequila industry. And we're also pushing it toward the super premium categories, leading to more of these entrepreneurial Disneyland brands and larger brands and more expensive brands. So there will still be new tequila coming, new innovation, new regulation, new production and process. But it's the kind of context that when you know more about tequila, you can better understand and appreciate tequila. And especially for us, we're a very clean brand. We have no additives whatsoever. We use a very clean process in our production. We actually grow our agave longer than anyone else. Well, not anyone else, longer than most people in the market, because we want to have more sugar to ferment prior to fermentation, because it gives you a better product in the long run. And so we're one of those little brands trying to fight and stick in there and fight our way into the tequila market. We're doing a great job. You might not know who we are, but we're not available in every market yet. We're working on it. We're available in New York, Florida, Missouri, and Indiana right now, soon to be all over the United States. But you can order us all over the United States either through our phone number 877-800-1398, or you can go on to hiatustequila.com, and we have a list of all the people who carry our products available on the web through maps. And you can order through one of the many locations who do carry us. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to Tequila Agave Regulation and Economics. It's been my pleasure to talk to you. Once again, my name is Garret Dostal, the brand ambassador of Hiatus Tequila from New York. And it is a pleasure to work for my little company who's fighting our piece of the agave industry. And it's also been a pleasure to get to talk to you today. So my friends, if you please remember, if you liked this or if you would like to help us out, please follow us on YouTube, and don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon so that you can get notified anytime that we come online and do any kind of tequila information and talk to you about our brand. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and it's been a pleasure to get to talk to you today. Cheers.